Hello there, everyone. I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and I am bringing you episode number 37 of the weekly Ratchet. I've been gone for a little bit, and I'll be honest, the cat has had my tongue. So I'm going to tell you a little tale, one that will probably bring you pause, and I'll do that right meow. Hey folks, and welcome back to the Weekly Ratchet. As always, I hope you've had a good 2 weeks of hopefully playing games with family or friends. We have not had a good 2 weeks here in this household, and I'm going to tell you about it here in a moment. It's not board game related, so the good news is that there really hasn't been anything heavily news related out of this house. I haven't had any new content come out. I really haven't even thought about sitting here and filming for 2 weeks. And I'll tell you why. It's not board game related. So if you're just here for the board game content, that's totally fine. No problem whatsoever. Go ahead and skip to the next timestamp where I talk about my recently acquired games. But for those who want to stick around, for those who may want to hear it, I want to introduce to you a very good friend of our family, someone who has been very, very special to us. This is Tinwald, or as he has always known himself, Tinny. Tinny was abandoned in a small neighborhood in Dresden, Ohio, where my dad and I worked on a contract assignment back in 2009. We had been there for about a year, and we suddenly saw these two cats show up. They wouldn't come anywhere near us. They wouldn't let us anywhere near them. But I eventually won Tinny over. Some food helped. And he just immediately picked me as his person. I hung out with him as much as I could. We weren't allowed to have pets in that little apartment. And so after a few weeks, I catnapped him and I took him home. And to this day, I think it was the best decision I ever made. We have had almost 16 amazing years with this cat. He's appeared in 2 Dice Tower videos. I did a clip on the Isle of Cats that he was in. It was very difficult to film because he just, for whatever reason, he hated tripods. He hated the lights. I don't know why. He never had a bad experience with them that I know of, but he hated, just if I would set up a tripod, he would take off. And I also did the Millennium video with him and all of our other cats and my daughter just a handful of months ago. And for that, I had to shoot in the daylight. I put the camera across the room. I kind of added some zoom to it so he wouldn't even know that it was there. When he was young, he used to lay across our shoulders. I have a picture, I'm hoping I can find, of him laying across my wife's shoulders when we were playing a board game when we lived back in Ohio several years later. And when he kind of outgrew that, he started to just love laying on my chest. He would, I'd sit back in a recliner or a chair, and he just loved to kind of sit on my shoulder and rest. 2 weeks ago, he was diagnosed with an insulinoma. It was a sort of a cancerous growth on his pancreas, and it was causing excess insulin production. He was turning hypoglycemic. He was starting to have seizures and some weird sort of neurotic episodes. We got him checked out. We kind of came up with a plan. We had him on some medicine. He had a couple of really, really great days. But last Saturday, he got sick. He spent a night in an animal hospital, which was unbelievably expensive. We got him back Sunday. He was a little better, but really not much. I got him back into his vet on Monday. Same thing. They kind of kept him going for the day, but each night we just didn't know if he was going to make it. Tuesday morning, he actually came into the room with me about 4 a.m. and just stayed the whole morning with me. And I kind of knew then that something wasn't right, because that wasn't really his normal behavior to actually sleep in bed with us. So Tuesday, I made some phone calls. I tried to see if there was anything else that we could do. It was going to cost us just too much money to keep him going, to get him to an appointment, to get him looked at by a professional, or by a specialist, and we knew we weren't going to be able to afford the surgery at that point. It was already just more than we could afford. And so we finally made a phone call, and a doctor came out and helped him find some peace that afternoon. And it was an absolutely terrible day. It was a terrible day. The only thing that was nice was that most pets, when they know that they're going, they just want to be alone. Our last cat hid under the bed for his last couple of days, and it really tore my wife up because she was really close with him. Tinny was the exact opposite. His last day, his last handful of hours, he just spent with us, either on my shoulder, on my wife's lap. He went over and hung out with my daughter just a little bit. And we knew that he was happy. We knew that he was in pain. We knew that he wasn't comfortable, but he was with his family, and we could just tell that that was where he wanted to be. I thought that this was going to hit me really, really, really hard. I really prepared for the worst out of this because he was just my best little friend. And I was really afraid that it was going to just knock everything out of me. And it kind of has. I haven't been eating that much. Only recently did I start cooking again. Only recently did I start playing games again. But because of my family and some friends, in fact, I want to give a shout out to Jeremy Brooks, who's been very supportive through instant message over the past couple of weeks. And it's because of that support that I think I'm doing a lot better than I expected. I'm not 100%. It'll be a long time before I am. This is very difficult right now. I'm barely in the mood. I'm barely in the mindset to do this, but the past couple of days have been good. I've been playing some games. I've been feeling better, and the show must go on. I will miss that little guy with all my heart forever, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to find a cat like him, and I know that I never will because he was one of a kind. But like I said, the show must go on. I've got a ton of games to talk about, and I'm going to pick the mood up here. I'm going to have a better video for the rest of this. So let's talk about a recently acquired game. Okay, let's move on. Let's pick things up here a little bit. Surprisingly enough, in the past 2 weeks, I only got one new game. Of course, I certainly haven't been thinking about buying games. This one was actually one I ordered a good couple of months ago, and it finally showed up. This is Hi-Fi from Smirk and Dagger Games. It is a fairly lightweight, sort of a card tile placement game, a pattern building game, definitely. I mentioned playing this at the Dice Tower Retreat a handful of months ago, which is when I then ordered it. And I actually have gotten to play this again very recently, so I'll talk a little bit more about it then. But I just need to show you this. This was the reason why this game grabbed me so much. Now, in college, I got into audio editing, audio mixing. I've been a musician for a long time. So this is a phonograph out of the box, and then you actually put the lid onto it here like so. Hang on a second, let me try and get this lined up. There we go. So it builds this fantastic little record player. The record spins. It is kind of your action selection method in the game. The box is mostly empty. Here is the rule book, which looks like a Rolling Stones magazine called the Ruling Book. Here is what kind of looks like an album of the Meeples, but it is a mixing board. And then you also have some XLR inputs and audio jack inputs and such as your scoreboard, round tracker, and a few other things. And then that's it, right? The rest of this is just a couple of cards and some components. And I know I complain about games that waste a lot of excess space on the shelf, and this is definitely one of them. But the table presence of this is just fantastic. We played it actually at a convention over the weekend, which I'll chat about here in a bit. And we had a lot of people just stop like, what is this? And of course, partially because it's new, but also just the way that this thing looks on the table is fantastic. So I'm excited to have it. I'm excited to play some more of Hi-Fi. This is, like I said, just an absolutely fantastic looking box. I mean, that wood grain even is just fantastic. That's Hi-Fi. Let me go ahead and get to question of the week. Okay, getting back into the swing of things with question of the week. 2 weeks ago, I asked you to tell me a little bit about your thoughts on print and play games. Now, I did mention, I believe, in that clip that I had a print and play game called Supermarché that I printed off a long time ago and had wanted to try out, and I was kind of using that topic as maybe an inspiration to get that game played. That didn't happen for somewhat obvious reasons, I think, possibly, maybe. However, a lot of folks had some good comments, some good feedback here, so let me go ahead and get to it. Kicking off with Mr. Jeremy Brooks himself, who said that he's never tried a print and play game, that he'd like to, but he has a hard enough time getting retail games to the table as it is. That's a pretty fair point. I can understand that very well. Jamie Wiley, on the other hand, said that he has about 30 print and play games, that his criteria is games that only require a few sheets of paper and can be soloed since no one else wants to play them. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting observation there. There probably is a little bit of a stigma around print and play games, at least to some extent, right? That maybe they're not really good games or they're not real games, who knows? And so, of course, with so much draw to new games, so that FOMO, to all that kind of stuff that happens in this hobby, I can see that folks would probably just sort of thumb their noses at a print and play game. Teshera said that he's never played a print and play game, but has printed various content for games from Board Game Geek. He's just never found a print and play game that interested him enough to try it out. And that's a very good observation. Yes, there is a ton of content out there on Board Game Geek, either folks who have made things like player aids or maybe improved components or maybe even, player-made expansions, etc. for games. There's a ton of that out there. And yes, if you want to go through that time and effort, you can find some pretty interesting stuff out there. And there's a little bit more on that coming up here in the comments as well. Wonderflonium said he's never tried print and play, but that he'd consider it as a way to play test a game, as being able to provide feedback would be worth the otherwise lackluster components. And I certainly understand your point there. I will say that really the components are only as lackluster as you wish to make them, right? That's the whole idea with the print and play game, is you can make it as deluxe or as simple as you wish. Thomas Greaves said that he likes and writes print and play games, but that he wants more than simply cards and card backs to print off. And that's an interesting take on it. Again, there's a wide variety of print and play games out there, just like there are, retail games. You can find some stuff that is just very, very simple. A couple of sheets of cards and card backs. You would typically use a simple playing card in a sleeve and then just put the printed front and backs of the cards into that sleeve, and you're just using that playing card, a standard 52 card deck as sort of the structure, right? The rigidity of that card. But some folks may want more than that, although again, that can kind of be the deterrent sometimes for getting those games actually produced and then played. Mark said that he's purchased one print and play game, Roll Estate, which was like a Monopoly the Dice game. He said he enjoyed it, but prefers the retail boxed game experience. First of all, I kind of had to chuckle at that Monopoly the Dice game, because Monopoly's a dice game. I mean, sort of, it's a roll and move, obviously. There's more to it than that, but I just kind of thought that was amusing. And I had not heard of that one, but I can also understand that. Same thing, right? Some folks, they just prefer that retail experience. And I think it's kind of the same thing as, making a real nice meal at home versus going out to eat. Sometimes going out to eat is just the better option. I can cook a pretty good steak, but I have had some better steaks at a restaurant for sure. Penny said that she too has not tried to print and play games, that she already has so many games that need played. However, she realizes that it could be an entirely new genre of games to love. Penny, if you go down that rabbit hole, I am not responsible. That is all on you, but I certainly understand that. Sometimes you just kind of have to draw the line and go, no, I am just not going to get into that aspect of the hobby because I already have too much. I feel that way about painting miniatures. I'd love to do it, but I am just forcing myself to stay away. So I understand. Yukon Zach said he likes to take print and play games and make a tabletop simulator mod out of them, as it is much less effort and most of the digital assets already exist on TTS. Now, for folks who don't know, and I think we've talked about this in some previous episodes, Tabletop Simulator is a PC-based 3D environment where you can play board games, but as Zach is mentioning here, it is very open to customization. You can create your own games, you can create mods for games. In fact, you can go and download just about any game that you want. A lot of them are out there. Illegal isn't quite the word, although it could be possibly in the eyes of a particular group of people. But you can go and get games that would cost hundreds of dollars retail, or even just secondhand, but you can play them on TTS basically for free if you purchase TTS itself. Anyways, I think that's pretty interesting, Zach. That's an extra level of dedication, I think. I mean, granted, yes, you're doing it on a computer, which is arguably easier than glue and knives and paper and printing and all that kind of effort, but still to be able to program that stuff in, to be able to get it all kind of laid out, to get it all rendered into the software, that's a whole nother level of dedication, and I can certainly appreciate that. Simulation Chris said he's tried a few print and play games because they're fairly easy to do with playing cards and sleeves, one of those being the game of Stew. He's also produced some fan-made content for games like Wingspan and Everdell. And I was thinking about that as I was putting this into my notes, that there are plenty of games out there that I really enjoy, Everdell being one of them, that there's expansions, there's all kinds of deluxe content. Obviously, I've got the big box edition, which I've never played. But when you think about the fan-made stuff that people have made for some of these games, it is unfathomable to consider how much extra content might be out there that I don't even know about, that a lot of folks probably don't even know about, that if you really wanted to get into that effort, you could probably play tons of new content. You could experience a ton of new stuff for these games that you didn't even know was out there and could probably keep you busy for a long time. It's pretty fascinating. Canuck Chuck said he really likes print and play games, that they are cheap, which is a plus if the game ends up being a stinker, that you can customize them and you don't care if things get damaged because you can just make another. And that's true. Of course, again, some folks may go really above and beyond making deluxe stuff, and suddenly it becomes much more of a prized possession that you want to take care of. But in general, yes, you're right. If you're just printing off a couple of cards and tossing them in the sleeves, who really cares if they get a little messed up? And finally, Mark B said that he and I are on similar footing. He's downloaded, printed, and played a few print and play games, but his desire to make quality productions of the components have resulted in many of them sitting in a folder on his computer, never seeing the light of day. Yeah, that's definitely a bummer. And I will also say that Mark brought up two good resources for print and play games on the internet. One is PNP, that's the letters, PNP Hideaway on Facebook. And there's also a top 50 PNP, I believe, a guild out on Board Game Geek. So certainly if you're interested in learning a little bit more about PNP games, print and play games, go and check out those sources. And I will say that I've never met, but I know Martin Gonzalez, I believe is his name, who runs the PNP Hideaway page on Facebook. Martin is over the top in what he does. He has showed pictures of games that he has made. In fact, he made a board game version, a board game theme, let me make sure I say that correctly, of Wingspan, where instead of collecting birds, you're collecting games and you're laying them out in a shelf, just like the idea of Wingspan and putting birds in these various biomes. It was incredible, and it was a long time ago that he published that, or he put that up there. But when you look at the stuff that he makes, you assume that it comes from a factory, some sort of a professional print facility. He can do stuff that most folks just won't bother getting into. And he has shared some tips with me. I've had some conversations with him on using the Cricut device to be able to cut out components and cards and such. But he can make his do things that I've never been able to get hours to do. And he has kind of tried to help me and coach me, but I've just never had the luck that he seems to have. So take that as you will, but certainly if you're just curious on what could be done with print and play games, go and check out the PNP Hideaway Facebook group. It's a private group. Tell them Tabletop Toolbox sent you. As I mentioned, I don't really have anything new here to add. And I haven't really yet thought about a topic that I want to talk about for next week. Again, I don't quite know that I'm in the mindset for that right now, but let me see what I can come up with before this episode is over. All right, the final segment of the Weekly Ratchet, of course, is recently played games, and I will be honest, I really did not think even 2 weeks ago that I was going to have a whole lot to talk about. As I mentioned, I think Tinny was diagnosed with his illness on Monday, and it just kind of knocked me out for a bit. But gaming for me is a bit of a release. It's a bit of a getaway. It kind of lets me escape from a lot of the stuff that's bothering me all the time. And I have a lot of recently played games. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off here. Last week, or 2 weeks ago after the previous Ratchet, my wife and I played Donut Shop. I mentioned I'd pick this up at a local gaming store. In fact, I picked up 3 games that weekend, and I've already played 2 of them here in this list. Donut Shop is a sort of a tile-laying tableau building game. Everyone's kind of working together and building this large tableau of donut tiles. You're laying out these tiles with 4 different donuts on them, and then you're also drafting these cards, and eventually you will spend those cards to box some of those donuts. So you might have a arrangement in that grid of, some maybe raspberry donuts and some crullers and some chocolate donuts. And if you have at least one of each of those cards in your hand, you can play them. You place a box lid over top of those donuts. They are now, gone. They've basically been boxed and, sold off. And other players are going to have to try and work around that grid. And what's interesting is that as you're placing out the tiles, you're trying to sort of create groups of donuts, and the rules there are a little weird. You pick a donut that's on the tile that you play. You say, okay, I'm going to use the vanillas. You'll score for every vanilla that's on that tile, and then every vanilla on a tile adjacent to that one that you placed, but only adjacent to the edge. So if there are 3 vanilla donuts on an adjacent tile, you're only going to score for 1 or 2 if they are directly adjacent to the tile that you just played. And that's a little wonky. We got the hang of it. At least I think we're playing that right. The rulebook was a little vague on some of those details. But anyways, you get 5 cents for every donut in that grouping. Then when you box the donuts, you also get 5 cents for every donut in that box. However, some of the cards may give you extra scoring abilities. You may be able to, one of the cards may show a sprinkle pattern on it. And if one of the donuts that you box has that sprinkle pattern, you can get like an extra 5 cents. We never knew if it was per donut or if it was just in general for having at least one in that box. Again, the rules kind of left us a little vague on that one. There are also some cards that have coffee symbols on them, and if you can spend at least 2 or 3 coffee symbols on the cards that you spend to box the donuts, again, you can get some extra money. And there is even a rule that you can spend extra cards as long as you're still spending a card that is of a type that goes into the box to get those extra points. Definitely one of those kind of swingy, lucky, sort of silly, hey, whatever happens, happens kind of a game. And the nice thing is that it's not too long, although we did probably play this for a good almost hour and a half. It says 20 to 40 minutes. If you're really sitting there and trying to look at the best place to drop down a box and try and get the most out of your combos and all that kind of thing, it can bog the game down just a little bit. And I think it was interesting too is that there are crullers in this game, those kind of spiral looking donuts, and we were halfway through the game before any of those cards even showed up in the deck. We had crullers all over the damn place on this tableau, and it was basically just the first person who finally got one of those cards was going to amass a ton of points by boxing a big group, because there are boxes of different sizes, and so the larger the box, the more money that you can make, and potentially more cards that you're spending, the more extra points you can make. And sure enough, it was my wife. She got the first cruller card, scored a ton of points, boxed a bunch of like dozen donuts on the board, and kicked my butt pretty good in this game. It was fun. It does look really, really nice. I love these little 3D trays that hold the donut tiles and hold the cards. It gives it a really nice table presence, but definitely a very light, again, just kind of a random game. Maybe the luck goes your way, you draw the cards that you need, maybe it doesn't, and you don't do too well. But that was Donut Shop. Then, the day before the shit hit the fan, I was invited over to a friend's house, and we actually did a double feature, back-to-back, 2 games of Wishland. Now, I already talked about Wishland once here on the Ratchet, and I, of course, forgot to take pictures from that night since we didn't finish until like 12:30 in the morning with the second game. But this is a tableau builder where you're trying to sort of build an amusement park, but really what you're just trying to do is get a bunch of cards, climb up a couple different tracks of happiness of your guests, the number of guests that you have in your park, and also get all of your workers out. And then there's a ton of various combo things that you can set up. There's a variety of end game scoring potential that you could get. And all of that you're basically doing just by buying these cards from a large display. The display only refreshes every 4 turns. There are 7 rounds, or maybe 9 rounds. I think it's 7 rounds in the game. And you're just trying to buy as much as you can and get as much as you can get done. in that time frame, and it uses a worker placement mechanism to be able to buy those cards, and it's one of those where you have to put out an extra worker for each stack of workers that is already there. I like the game, I think, although honestly after the second game of it I kind of thought I might just sort of be done with this already, because while there are a couple little variants and expansions, I would really never want to play this game without them. It's just too light and too simple and too repetitive without those, and even with them, it still doesn't add that much. There are these entrepreneur cards that can give you either different startup scenarios or different resources, different bonuses to start the game off with. They may give you an ongoing little benefit throughout the game, where they may give you an end game scoring opportunity. And each one's very different, and it's also quite hard to tell if they're really very balanced. We used them in our second game, and it was a 4-player game, and a couple players were like, I never even used mine. It didn't do anything for me. And meanwhile, you got to do all this, whatever. And there's also the Dreams from America expansion, which came with this new 3rd edition. Really just adds more of the same, but it does add some fairly unique cards that can help you with some pretty strong scoring opportunities. And in fact, the first game I did terrible with, although I did get a lot of endgame scoring. The second game, I managed to squeak a second place, as myself and the player who did win had a ton of endgame scoring through those dream cards, they're called. But I still just kind of feel like it's still just a pure dumb luck of what cards come out. Do the cards come out that you can use, and can you grab them at that moment? Do you have enough money? Do you have enough workers to be able to grab them before someone else does? Or is someone even going to notice? And a lot of times the cards would come out and someone would go, oh man, Jeff's really going to want that card. And then someone goes, well, I'm going to go ahead and grab that because I'm higher on the turn order, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, again, I like it. I wish that the theme came through a little stronger. I think I mentioned this in the last episode. The art on the cards is very nice, but it doesn't mean anything. You're not paying any attention to it because you're so busy just immersing yourself into the various symbology to try and rack up points. It's a nice production. I guess I just wish that there was a little more strategy into it and less of just hunting and pecking for cards and trying to get them at the right time and hoping that things go your way. That is Wishland. Up next, so this was the week after Tinny had passed. Actually, yes, first it was this one. So the Wednesday afterwards, we did go out to Center of the Universe. We weren't very social, but luckily they weren't very busy that night. That's the 3 of us kind of sat there and just kind of hung out a little bit. We did do a little round of Lacuna. I've talked about this one before on the Ratchet. Just a very light game where you're trying to win a majority of these little colored flowers that go out on this mat. I packed Barren Park, and the moment I got there, I was like, why did I pack this? I have no interest in playing this. But we did play 2 games of this, and it was just a nice kind of relaxing experience. I will always recommend Lacuna. Then, a few days later, when things kind of started to slowly get back to normal, I broke out this one. I've talked about this one before. This is Theme Park Mania. I mentioned this actually, I think, 2 weeks ago when it had just come in. Terrible looking box. And I also found out doing some research later that a good amount of the art in this box is AI generated, and there is a big sort of uproar against that. I have mixed thoughts on AI, and I'm not going to get into it. I've had to use it in some of my videos because I can't afford stock footage or stock videos or stock whatever, because that stuff everything wants a subscription and they're very expensive. And I'm just a one-man operation doing board game content, so I kind of need some help. I would tend to think that if you're doing a Kickstarter, yeah, you should probably toss in a line in the budget for some artwork. But anyways, I'm going to try not to go into this one too much, but this is an interesting game where you're basically laying out these tiles to build an amusement park. Unlike Wishland, this one definitely gets its theme a lot closer because you're laying out pathways, you're actually laying out even railroad tracks to help people be able to get around to the various amusements. Now, unfortunately, your rides are just a large tile, kind of a 2x2 grid tile that you're placing out into this tableau. And it has art on it, sort of a theme, like a pirates or space or a racing amusement or something. But that's really it. There's no 3D element to those at all. And there are also additional stalls that you can build restaurants and restrooms, gift shops. There's even a couple little game stalls that you can place. But again, they're just tiles, and some of them are clearly AI art because they have text on them that cannot be read. It's not even real letters. You're laying all this out, and once you get a certain number of rides built in the park then opens. And you then add an extra action that each player can take. You only get to take one action on your turn. And you'll have a meeple that you can then move around this park. You're playing cards to get movement, and you're moving this meeple around the park and visiting the different rides, both your own and any of your opponents. And when you visit a ride, you place a small meeple in that ride as a reminder that you've been there. You get paid the entrance cost of the park, which increases as more rides get built in the park. But then you have to pay the ride cost to the ride's owner, and the ride cost will be usually a flat rate for the ride itself, plus additional money for any of those convenience stalls that are adjacent or connected to kind of a grid to that ride itself. And so each ride has to be compartmentalized. You can't have a ride and all of its extra add-ons eventually run into another ride, because then of course you can't tell them apart. So it's not like Carcassonne in that you can actually add things together and kind of steal points from other players. You can't do that. Here's the thing. Building the park was kind of neat. There are these, I mentioned that there are railroad tracks, and you can build these train stations, and then you can actually use the trains to get around this park quicker, but there's these just confusing rules as far as paying the players of the other stations that you either depart or arrive or drive through. But in a two-player game, you only get two of these things. And so we almost kind of had to intentionally wait until we had the park about as big as we thought it was going to be, and then plop down our train stations to help us kind of get back and forth. I would have rathered some sort of a dummy player or something, at least a way to add in some extra train stations at those lower player counts to make it worth it. The other thing is that the whole earning money and spending money when you visit a ride was really, really confusing. I was able to kind of get a hang of it. That my wife, I think, was just confused the whole time. But of course, if it's your ride, you don't have to pay for it. But if it's your opponent's, then you have to pay. It's just really weird, because it's kind of like I'm representing a guest. That guest pays me, but then I also represent the guest in that I'm paying. Like, it does not make any sense. I am both the recipient and the customer. I'm the customer and the theme park at the same time, and it just did not make any sense. I will say that by the time we had the whole park built, it did look pretty cool. It was a really neat table presence, and I did enjoy this kind of race of trying to get around the park, trying to visit all the different rides. It's one of those games where, like Carcassonne, and I will never forget the Shut Up and Sit Down review of Carcassonne, which is an old video. You should go check it out. But Paul, in that video, talks about the fact that at some point in that game, you're sitting there going, oh, I haven't gotten that done yet, and this isn't done yet, and that's never going to get finished, and so on and so forth. And that's how this game felt. You're sitting there, you're trying to enclose off your rides, you're trying to get the right add-ons to your rides, you're trying to get roads to your rides, you're trying to get around and get to all the rides. The first person to have visited every ride in the park triggers the end of the game immediately, and so it got very, very tight in the end. We actually ended up with a tie, which is always hilarious when my wife and I tie. I won the tiebreaker, but the tiebreaker was simply who can get out of the park quickest. And I thought it was a stupid tiebreaker. I mean, dumb, because it should have been like who visited the most rides, maybe who had the most money left over, and she would have won both of those. So I won the tie, but I kind of conceded, if you will, because it just didn't seem to make sense. Anyways, that was Theme Park Mania. I kind of want to try it again. I realized we got one little rule wrong when we were playing, in that every one of your little tiles that attach to a ride also have to be along a path, and we kind of goofed that up just a little bit. But I also just can't say that I'm really interested in playing it again, because the rules are so funky, and even though you've got all these stalls and all these meeples all over the place, which did look kind of neat by the end of the game, you still just don't get that thrill of a theme park. It still doesn't quite get it there. It's better than Wishland, but it's still not where I really want it to be. Anyways, that was Theme Park Mania. I still talked too long about that one. All right, so then over the weekend I mentioned, I think, that I played a ton of games over the weekend, and that's because we had, I'm trying to wake up my computer here, we had RivirCon. And I've talked about RivirCon here in the past. It's a local game convention that takes place, actually it's about 15 minutes from here, and it is really becoming a great event. The organizers, the main organizer is Troy, and I know two of the other gentlemen who are helping out with it, and they have just really focused on making it for the gamers. They have a large flea market area going. They had like a little drink and snack stand they'd take around, very, very cheap. You can grab some snacks. They actually organized a food truck to be there both nights. They have a library that they're working on building out. They have games that they give away every time. I don't know where they're getting the games from, and it's only like maybe $25-$30 to go for Friday and Saturday. Anyways, it's just a really, really nice con. I really, really like what they're doing with it. I was going when it was, 30, 35, 40 people. Now it's maybe about 100 something people. And I think he's got the potential there to make it bigger. And I'm looking forward to it. But I went there, and I was surprised that my buddy Daniel went as well. The first game that we played was Hi-Fi. As I mentioned, of course, I just got this. Now, we didn't play my copy. My friend Chris Mutton was there. We played on his copy. He left his rule book at home, so I had to pull the rules up on my phone. And it was a good game. Now, I don't want to get too far into it because I could basically end up just teaching the game. But in this game, you are competing sound engineers, and you're trying to produce a record for a band called the Meeples. You have 4 tracks, and you'll be placing out these colored cards, and each card represents one of 4 different instruments. You have the guitarist, the bassist, the drummers, and your vocalist. And you're almost kind of arguing on how each song should get laid out. And that's about as far as the theme really gets, if I'm being honest. But as you saw earlier in this video, you've got this record that you spin, and that's actually how you pick your action. There are, I believe, 5 actions in the game. Some of them will either give you cards. They may give you what are called production points, which you can then spend to get some extra kind of little benefits throughout the game, including spinning the record a little further to take the action that you may really want. You've also got these knobs that you can put down, but they really just come out to points. They just kind of add some extra scoring throughout the game. There's not a lot of mixing or editing really baked into the game. But you also have these 2 cards that you can also get throughout the game, and one of them will give you end game scoring. So things like have a certain number of knobs out on the different instrument tracks. Make sure that this instrument is the most prevalent in the in the overall album. And then there are these other cards that you get, which basically establish a 4-card sequence. And it can be on any track, anywhere in that track. But it may say, okay, we'll get a drummer, 2 guitarists, and then the vocalist. And just get the cards in that order. And if at any point you get anything even close to it, you can play the card. If you have 2 cards right, you get a point. 3 cards right, 4 points. 4 cards right, 7 points. And so the game is one of those where, okay, I'm trying to get this set up just right, and then some player gets something that says, oh, hey, if I can just change that instrument out, I can get the thing that I need. And suddenly they start moving your cards around. Of course, they're not your cards. It's a communal board. And they take away something that you've been working towards, and it's like, oh, you mother. And the thing is that, and I've realized it too, playing it in the past, is that if you're trying to get your setup made, you will be there for a while. And like I said, someone may knock down your house of cards, and you're kind of you guys almost start all over again. Now, there are some combo abilities. Again, I'm not going to get into the rules, but depending on how you put the cards down, you can get some extra benefits if you set things up the right way. Maybe some extra points. Maybe you can put an extra knob out for some extra points later. There's even a rule that lets you swap the cards around. Maybe placing a card out and replacing a card that's on the board with one that's in your hand. What I started getting into kind of the later half of the game is I just constantly kept going for those scoring cards. And I would look at whatever I was closest to getting on the board, take that, try and get one play out where I'd swap a card, and boom, 7 points. I actually managed to do that like 3 or 4 times. And then also because I was collecting these endgame scoring cards, some of which I got a lot of points out of, some of which I only got a few points out of, but I just had more than anyone else. I just kept taking that action over and over again to take 2 of these cards, look at each, pick one of each, and use them. And so at the end, I just ran away with the score, especially at the end game, because I just simply had more options than the other players at the table. In that sense, again, there's a lot of luck. Do we get the right cards when you need them? Can you sort of set those options up? Do you just kind of like hose over another player because you keep rearranging their cards? And that can make it a swinging experience. It's fairly light. There is an advanced mode, which really just adds more randomness because those special abilities that trigger in different ways with each turn as opposed to being static, which is the way that we played it. Anyways, you still cannot argue about the production of this game. And I have to laugh because there was a topic on the Dice Tower a while back when this game was mentioned. And Z Garcia made a comment, something like, yeah, if you're the kind of person that sees a mixing board and think, geez, I want a game out of that, then sure, this is for you. In that kind of arrogant way that he likes to put stuff. And I sat there watching it and I was like, yeah, I'm absolutely that kind of player. I've seen mixing boards at like record stores or like a Sam Ash type of thing. And I just want to sit there and play with it, click the buttons and have fun. And you see this on the table and it's like, oh, I just want to turn the knobs and slide the sliders and just have fun with it. And that is what this does. And how many games have competing sound engineers as a theme? We had a lot of people come by like, what is this? This looks really, really weird. Never seen anything like this. We had a lot of people coming by the table, and it was cool to get to tell them all about hi-fi. All right, only a couple more left. That was the first game of Friday. The next game we played was Anno 1800, specifically using the Die Erweiterung airships expansion. Daniel actually brought his copy of the game and the expansion in. He had ordered me this off of Amazon Germany. Of course, as you can clearly see, this box is in German, and they have no intention, from what I understand, of producing this in America, which is a bummer. Most of it is all language independent, except for, of course, the rule book. And he had a printed out copy of basically translated rules, and I was even using the translate image thing on my phone to help me with some of the rules out as well. We did eventually get through it. We played this 3-player. In fact, Dan Cheston, a viewer here of Tabletop Toolbox, joined us as well for that game. It was long. Anno 1800 is a very, very long game. And it also has a bit of a luck element in that you're getting these cards. With every worker that you get a card, and it kind of establishes something that worker might want. And if you can meet those requirements by basically producing the resources that worker wants, that can generate either extra resources, extra points, some cases extra workers. It's all kinds of stuff. And when you get a card done, it's actually worth points for you at the end of the game. So I kind of started off without much in my hand. So I kind of had to take some extra actions I didn't really want to take just to get more workers. But then I finally got a couple cards that gave me more workers, and I just started this snowball effect. And I suddenly had a ton of workers on my board. The more workers you have, typically the more that you can get done before you kind of have to do a refresh action. Everyone goes home and it opens all your shops back up. And this kind of has that tech tree idea in that, okay, well, I want to get to making engines, but before I can make engines, I got to make steel. Before I can make steel, I got to make coal. I also need glass. Well, before I can get glass, I need to get, sand or something. And you've got to produce these different industries that then unlock the next industry. But then also someone else may have the industry. There's only 2 of each copy in the game. So if someone else gets it, well, you can just trade with them and get it. And it really does become this big efficiency puzzle. And okay, you can play these cards as long as you can meet the requirements as many times in a turn that you want. And so you may get a couple cards played that then pile you up with resources, let you play more cards that then maybe free you up to finally produce that next big resource that you're working towards. The airship adds these kind of like another goal to work towards that give you gears, and then the gears let you take extra actions throughout the game. It doesn't really work until maybe the middle of the game because those resources are all like the higher tiers of things that you have to produce. So it took us quite a while to even start getting gears and then finally start, using that aspect of the game. But I still really enjoyed it. It was a very, very long game. I've always liked Anno 1800. It is not for everybody. It is a long experience. And it can just feel like it just keeps dragging on because I just keep getting more workers. I keep getting more cards. You play until somebody runs out of cards. So you kind of get yourself into this cycle. Eventually you've got to say, look, I'm just going to stop picking up guys. I'm going to stop getting workers. And then next thing you know, all of a sudden everyone's out of cards, just about. And like, oh my gosh, we only get 1 or 2 more turns. And how much can I get done? But I because of that snowball effect I got going, I had quite a lot of points at the end of this game. And I won another game of Anno 1800 with the expansion. Really just a fun experience. Up Next, so that was the end of Friday. We got there. I'm going to try and tell this quickly. We got there Saturday morning, and we had arranged ahead of time, Daniel and I, we wanted to play Voidfall again. Voidfall was a game that we kind of rallied around a bunch, several months ago when I was doing the big review for the Dice Tower. It was a game where I don't know that I love it, but I really enjoy playing it with Daniel, if that makes sense. Just our personalities get along, and we can just kind of laugh about our mistakes. We can kind of shrug off our mistakes, and we can just play Voidfall. We want to try it cooperatively because, he's been kind of getting out of gaming lately. He's been a little he just hasn't really been feeling it. And I thought maybe if we did something cooperative, maybe if we could work together on a game, that'd be more fun. And we had it sitting on a table Friday. A guy came over and he was like, well, hey, what do you know about the co-op experience? And I said, well, funny you ask, because we're going to do that tomorrow morning. And he goes, I'm in. Let's do it. So Friday night until like 12:30 in the morning, I sat there and refreshed the rules, kind of refamiliarize myself with the components, and we started playing Saturday morning. Daniel got there at 8:30 and started setting up. I got there about 9 o'clock, almost, maybe a little bit before. We finally finished setting up around 9:30, 9:45, so over an hour. We kind of quickly taught this gentleman, Adam, how to play, and he had checked out some videos, which was good. We started our first turn at about 10:30. At 12:30, we finished the first of 3 rounds. At 4:30, we finished the game. So it was 8 hours of Voidfall, including setup and a little bit of a teach, to lose the co-op experience. The Voidborn kicked our asses. Now, I played a faction that I really, really like playing and I'm fairly comfortable with, and I managed to beat the target score, but the other 2 players didn't. Basically, everything in Voidfall that you don't get done gives points to the AI opponent, and then all the players have to meet or exceed that score. I did what I could to kind of keep the Voidborn score down, but I was really the only person taking over systems. I was the only person expanding across the map. When I saw opportunities to knock out their harbingers or various things that I knew was going to give them points, I made sure to advertise that to the group. I made sure that we took those opportunities to reduce those scores. But I only wound up with like 240 points, something like that. Maybe it was even 220. And I've scored well over almost 400 points, well over 300 points with that faction. It's hard. It is a very, very hard game. There's so much to manage. There's a whole separate board with these crisis cards and events and wars and all this stuff that comes out. And it's still one of those games where I, as the person who sort of was most familiar with it, because I've played the solo game before and it's very similar to the solo experience, I had to tell people, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get hit. You're going to get attacked here. You're going to lose that system. He's going to do this. Here's the cost you have to deal with in this turn. And again, I felt like I was constantly the bad news bearer. I talked about this last episode with the Tidal Blades game. And it just becomes disheartening for me to constantly have to tell people all the bad stuff that's going to happen to them. Daniel checked out, unfortunately, long before the game was over. I mean, he got through it, but he had the lowest score. And he was like, I was so done with this long before we were actually done with it. And I don't think we'll ever play that again. And we did talk about later, like, maybe 2-player would be a little better, but it's longer because these cards come out at the beginning of each player's turn that sets a cost to do something. It says, well, if you can do this while also having this or while spending extra or whatever, then you can get rid of this card. And as the cards stack up, if you don't get rid of them, the battles with the Voidborn become stronger. You have to pay extra costs at the end of each age, and it gets to be very, very stressful. But it also means that between each turn, you go, okay, well, here's the card that's out. How do we want to tackle this? What about the ones we still have here? Who is going to do this? Well, there's also a couple of cards that you can kind of share. There's these focus cards, which is how you choose your actions, and there are some that are joint in the co-op game. And if you play one, you can trigger multiple players to kind of take that action with you. You have to pay all the costs, but they have to, they can also take those actions. And so you're kind of sitting there going, well, hey, I want to try and do this. Who's going to benefit from this? But I really need help doing this. Well, hang on. Okay, you want to fight. Well, maybe I can do this for, and just that collaboration, which is what you need in a co-op game, adds so much time to the experience. Anyways, that was our 8-hour loss at Voidfall. After that, we got some food. We needed some food. And then I broke out a game of Dominations. Now, this is from Holy Grail Games. Holy Grail is out of business. They basically folded as they were trying to distribute their game Rallyman Dirt, which I backed and will never receive, unfortunately. But this is one of their slightly older titles. This is a civilization game, a very abstract civilization game, where you're playing out these triangular tiles to build a large central tableau. And each color of the tile has to do with knowledge and science and religion and industry and yada yada. But again, it's very, very abstract. None of that really means anything. You just get 3 orange and 2 purple and a yellow. That's all you really care about. And then in each turn, you can either build cities on these tiles, which is just a plastic cap. You can start working on wonders, the same common wonders that we see in all these Civ games. And then you also get to start working on your, I believe it's called the Nexus, although that may not be the right term. And you're laying out this separate grid of square cards in front of you, and you're trying to connect them together. There are these little colored half circles on each side of the card, and you're trying to arrange them in a way you have to match up the colors between the different cards, and they will give you extra abilities. There's a huge range of them. They may give you extra resources at the beginning of each turn. They may give you reduced costs for building cities or reduced costs for researching more of those cards. They may give you endgame scoring. They may give you end of age scoring. There's a ton of different stuff that they do. And it's nice. I like it. But eventually you have 16, 20 of these cards in front of you, and you really quickly start to lose track of what you can and need and are able to do. I also missed a couple rules, some ones that actually cost us a lot of points. A whole aspect of the game we almost just didn't get to explore because I missed something. So, I mean, I liked it, and I need to play it again. This is only the second time I've played it over many, many years, and so I'd like to try and check it out now that I know it a little bit better, and I can probably, teach it quicker and play it more efficiently with a better understanding. A neat game, something I need to explore a little more. There's also like 6 expansions of this thing, and I have them all. This is Dominations. I'm running out of room back here. Okay, the last game that we played at the RivirCon event was Joyride Turbo. I have the box down here, but I'm not going to pick it up, tilt that thing onto its side. This is the last thing that we got into. By then, we were all kind of pretty tired. And I said, hey, let's play something kind of fun and lighthearted. Let's do a little Destruction Derby racing game. I had a blast with it. I still love this game. I played with my friend Daniel and Mike Gallo, who I've mentioned a couple times here on the Ratchet. Mike... he started off in the lead. He took a corner. I kind of cut into him and I spun him around 180, and instead of just slowing down and trying to make a quick U-turn, he decided, no, I'm going to take this wild, crazy path around the board and kind of catch up to you guys. And that did not work out for him. He got stuck, ended up having to do 2 U-turns and was just way behind us. Daniel and I were neck and neck pretty well until I just used one of my power-ups that gave me a real quick edge and let me kind of get out ahead. I had a lot of fun with it. Mike didn't, because he just got knocked back so hard that he couldn't recover, so he was basically just trying to just move around the track. Like, he was just kind of there in spirit because he wasn't really competing at that point. I think Daniel was enjoying it, but again, just kind of getting a little mental fatigue at that point. And he's not really a big racing kind of a fan, and I understand that. But I do still really like this game. We had some good laughs about it. We had a couple of crashes. We actually set up kind of a figure 8, and we had at least one instance where we kind of came into each other and just had some good laughs over that one. That was Joyride Turbo. And the last game that I played here in the past week, just actually yesterday, it's my daughter and I broke out Minecraft Builders and Biomes. This is another game I mentioned I got just a week ago from Ravensburger. And I gotta be honest, this game was pretty decent. Production quality is terrible, very, very thin cardboard. Your characters are just the Minecraft characters just printed on white cardboard. There's no pizzazz. But you do start off with this large cube of just wooden blocks that represent different ingredients or different blocks that you can mine in Minecraft. You're collecting these blocks while moving around this grid of tiles. When you're between them, they flip face up. There may be a monster that you can fight, or there may be a building that you can build in a different biome. And then around the outer perimeter are various weapons that you can get, including, of course, the illustrious TNT. When you want to fight a bad guy, you use a very simple sort of maybe just a card flipping mechanism. I don't know what you would call it, but you have your stack of weapons. You start off with like a sword and a pickaxe and then a bunch of poisonous potatoes. I didn't know what they were. My daughter was like, oh yeah, I know those, whatever. But you just get to play 3 of them off your stack. The poisonous potatoes don't do anything. But if you draw enough weapons, you can then defeat the bad guy. And of course, eventually you're getting more weapons, but you never get to get rid of the poisonous tomatoes. So it's kind of, or potatoes. But it's kind of a push your luck. It's not really push your luck, but it's just again, am I going to reveal enough tokens quick enough to defeat the bad guy? As far as scoring goes, you have 3 scoring rounds in the game when the first, second, and third level of blocks gets removed from the block display. And the first time you're going to score for environments in the cards that you're building out. The second time you're going to score points for the construction material of the building on the tile. So you may have a log cabin in the forest. So the first time you might want to be trying to score for forests, and the second time you're going to try and score for wooden buildings. And then the third scoring is going to be for a specific feature of that building. So for example, in the third round, I scored for farms. I managed to have a bunch of farms in a grid. They all have to be connected in a grid on this 3x3 tableau that you're building. And everything that you're doing is giving you points. You've got the little green orbs, just like Minecraft, and you just go around your board keeping track of your own score. I really kind of enjoyed it. I mean, it's very light. There's not a ton of strategy necessarily, but there kind of is, because some of the monsters or the mobs that you can take out may also set up some additional endgame scoring for you. And so actually I beat my daughter in this one because I did set up a ton of endgame scoring. She was neck and neck with me score-wise the whole game, but only in endgame I kind of took off with some extra opportunities that I had set up. I think it's great for kids. She's actually interested in checking it out with some of her middle school friends, and I enjoyed this. There's also an expansion out for it. I don't know anything about it, but I might pick that up because it's only like $20 on Amazon. That is Minecraft Builders and Biomes. All right, that's it for games. I wanted to give a question of the week for next week, or whenever I get to do the next Ratchet. I'm planning on doing one the next week. I did have an idea of something I wanted to ask, something very fun, something even not board game related, something a little related to the events that happened here over the past 2 weeks, but next weekend and the weekend after, we're going to be out of town over in Shenandoah, and so I just don't know how much filming and editing time I'm going to have. I still plan on doing a Ratchet. I just don't want to make it too much work for me. So I'll come back to that topic later, okay? And maybe that'll be the one that I do a behind the scenes type video to celebrate the 1,000 subscribers that, hey, we still have. So for next week, I'm going to ask something lighthearted and kind of fun. This is on the same vein of the do you sleeve or do you not sleeve? And this one might get really controversial. I want to know if you stack your games vertically or the right way, horizontally. That's the question for next week, and I will see you then, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks for sticking around. Talk to you soon. Cheers.